There is a moment in every scientific investigation when the boundary between known reality and the impossible simply collapses. For decades, the public narrative surrounding Skinwalker Ranch was built on what was happening overhead. We watched footage of glowing orb phenomena drifting across the Utah desert, listened to tales of strange creatures vanishing into thin air, and analyzed radar logs showing objects making right-angle turns at thousands of miles per hour. The world was conditioned to look toward the heavens for answers. But deep within the classified logs of the research team, an entirely different story was quietly taking shape, one that suggests humanity has been looking in the wrong direction all along. The true epicenter of the anomaly at Skinwalker Ranch was never the sky, it was the Mesa. To the untrained eye, the Mesa is just an imposing wall of weathered reddish sandstone towering over the eastern boundary of the 512-acre property. Geological consensus had long held that it was nothing more than a standard formation carved by eons of wind and water erosion, a passive, silent witness to the bizarre phenomena below. But when astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor, principal investigator Erik Bard, and their scientific team began deploying military-grade sensors directly against the rock wall, the geology began to contradict itself in ways that defied classical physics. It started with a series of routine multispectral thermal imaging runs taken during the dead of night. Standard sandstone absorbs solar heat throughout the blistering desert day and radiates that energy back out into the night sky in smooth, predictable gradients. But when the thermal cameras swept across the Mesa cliff face, the monitors displayed an absolute impossibility. Deep inside the mountain, buried beneath 30 feet of natural rock, were sharp, cold geometric shapes. These were not natural caverns or underground trickles of water. The thermal boundaries were unnaturally precise, displaying perfect 90-degree angles and rectilinear grids operating at a constant, freezing -20 degrees Celsius, completely unaffected by the sweltering heat of the summer desert outside. It was as if an immense industrial cooling loop was actively running deep within the rock face, regulating the internal temperature of something buried deep inside the Mesa. Driven by these thermal anomalies, the team brought heavy industrial equipment onto the property to bore directly into the cliff. The plan was simple: drill a 4-inch exploratory shaft through the outer sandstone and retrieve core samples of whatever lay behind the thermal wall. But the moment the tungsten carbide drill bit reached 32 feet into the Mesa, the entire operation ground to a sudden violent halt. The drill rig shuddered so violently that steel support cables snapped under the strain. Heavy industrial motors stalled out in a cloud of acrid smoke. When the crew pulled the drill string out of the mountain to inspect the damage, what they found left the engineers in total disbelief. The brand new diamond-tipped tungsten cutting heads, built to slice through solid reinforced concrete and granite, had been completely sheared off, flattened, and crushed to bare metal. The drill hadn't struck hard quartz or dense granite. It had hit a smooth, impenetrable barrier that refused to yield to industrial torque. When the team flushed the shaft with water to retrieve microscopic slurry samples, the material brought up to the surface sent shockwaves through the university testing laboratories. Mixed within the red sandstone dust were flakes of an exotic composite material, a high-density matrix of ultra-pure titanium, aluminum, and heat-resistant carbonaceous ceramics that do not exist in natural geological formations anywhere on Earth. The Mesa was not a solid mountain of sandstone. It was an artificially armored vault, engineered to shield a massive subterranean infrastructure. And as the team was about to discover, the moment they struck that buried barrier, the mountain didn't just resist their intrusion, it woke up. The precise instant the diamond drill bit struck that subterranean metallic barrier, every spectrum analyzer inside the command trailer spiked off the charts. It wasn't a random static burst or a surge of natural terrestrial noise. A powerful high-amplitude broadcast erupted directly from the drill shaft, locking onto the protected 1.6 GHz radio band, the exact same frequency recorded during high-altitude craft sightings and cattle mutilations across the basin. Striking the barrier inside the Mesa was the electromagnetic equivalent of ringing an ancient subterranean bell. Realizing that drilling blindly through the synthetic armor was physically impossible without destroying millions of dollars in industrial machinery, Dr. Travis Taylor shifted tactics. To map the true dimensions of the buried structure without physically cutting into it, the research team deployed an advanced seismic reflection tomography array along the entire length of the cliff face. By firing specialized acoustic wave generators into the rock and recording how the shock waves bounced off subterranean boundaries, supercomputers could build a three-dimensional volumetric map of the mountain's internal skeleton. When the acoustic data finished compiling into a high-resolution render, the images displayed on the monitors silenced every scientist in the room. The Mesa was hollowed out. Suspended directly inside the center of the mountain was a colossal vault-like chamber stretching over 300 feet in length. Surrounding this subterranean cavern was a continuous, smooth layer of non-conductive, ultra-dense composite material, The very same titanium-aluminum-ceramic matrix recovered from the crushed drill bit. The acoustic waves could not penetrate the chamber's core. They bounced off its curved outer shell like sound echoing through an empty cathedral. Even more unsettling was the spatial orientation of the chamber. The internal vault was not aligned with the natural fault lines, sedimentary strata, or geological fracture zones of the Uinta Basin. It was aligned with absolute mathematical precision along Earth's true magnetic north-south axis. As the supercomputer processed secondary gravimetric data, an even more terrifying discovery emerged. Branching off from the central vault inside the mesa were 3 hollow, cylindrical conduits measuring nearly 20 feet in diameter. These underground tunnels, carved deep through the bedrock beneath the desert floor, extending horizontally across the property until they converged directly beneath the ranch's infamous triangle area. The strange atmospheric phenomena, spatial distortions, and phantom radar returns recorded in the sky above the triangle were not originating from deep space. They were sitting directly above the terminal junction of 3 subterranean power lines radiating straight out from the heart of the mesa. The entire 512-acre property was functioning as a single fully integrated machine. The mesa was the hardened control center and power reservoir for an ancient subterranean complex, an infrastructure that had remained hidden beneath the sandstone for centuries. To prove that these buried conduits were actively conducting energy to the surface, the team set up a high-power radio transmitter over the exact path where the central subterranean conduit crossed the desert floor. They programmed the transmitter to sweep across a wide band of radio frequencies, listening for any sign of harmonic resonance from the ground below. For 20 minutes, the instruments recorded only ambient background static. But the second the signal generator hit 1.6 gigahertz, the physical environment surrounding the team reacted with terrifying speed. The baseline magnetic field readings on the surface magnetometers skyrocketed from 35 microteslas to over 2 full teslas in a fraction of a second, a magnetic surge powerful enough to pull iron tools off the tailgates of the research trucks, dragging them across the dust toward the line of the buried tunnel. Simultaneously, the temperature inside the open exploratory drill hole plummeted from 70 degrees Fahrenheit down to -15 degrees in less than a minute. Thick, supercooled vapor began pouring out of the narrow drill opening, freezing into glittering ice crystals that hovered over the sun-baked soil. The buried conduit had reacted to the external frequency by initializing an internal cryogenic loop, drawing thermal energy out of the surrounding surface rock and drawing it back into the insulated vault inside the mountain. Through the thick, supercooled vapor pouring out of the drill shaft, the scientific team witnessed a visual anomaly that defied the basic laws of optics. As the sun hung high over the Utah desert, the ambient light directly above the borehole began to warp and ripple. Looking across the valley floor toward the cliff face, the massive wall of sandstone appeared to shimmer like a desert mirage, not from heat, but from an intense localized distortion of space-time. Laser rangefinders aimed at the mesa flashed persistent error codes. The coherent light beams were no longer traveling in straight lines, but bending around an invisible, spherical field resting directly over the drill site. The localized gravitational gradient had reached such extreme intensity that light was literally refracting around an invisible barrier suspended 10 feet off the ground. Inside the command trailer, the microgravimeters registered chaotic, rapid fluctuations, oscillating between normal Earth gravity and near zero within fractions of a second. The subterranean system buried within the mesa was generating a localized gravitational field independent of the planet's pull. Dr. Travis Taylor and Erik Bard realized that the 3 subterranean conduits were acting as massive magnetic induction loops, drawing gigawatts of raw electrical energy from deep mineral aquifers beneath the Uinta Basin and channeling it into the central vault of the mountain. As this vast surge of power hit the core of the mesa, the pencil-thin beam of light from their exploratory laser setup underwent a terrifying transformation. The narrow beam swelled into a towering 10-foot-wide column of cold, ice-blue plasma that shot straight out of the exploratory shaft and pierced the sky. The force of the expanding energy field blew away the remaining topsoil around the drill site, exposing the smooth, vitrified, fused glass rim of the subterranean conduit buried beneath the desert floor. At that exact moment, the erratic 1.6 gigahertz radio pulse collapsed into a solid, unbroken carrier wave. The rhythmic telemetry sequence stopped, replaced by a continuous high-amplitude signal that saturated every receiver within a 20-mile radius. The subterranean network was no longer transmitting passive data. It had established a direct, unbroken energy circuit between the Earth's core and the upper atmosphere. Above the ranch, low-hanging clouds over the triangle were drawn into a rapid, swirling atmospheric vortex centered precisely above the blue plasma pillar. High-altitude meteorological sensors registered a sudden drop in ionospheric elevation. The upper layers of Earth's atmosphere were being physically pulled downward toward the valley floor by the Gravitational gradient anchored inside the Mesa. The biological toll on the research crew reached a critical threshold. The electromagnetic static induced severe inner-ear spatial disorientation, acute pressure behind the eyes, and spontaneous nerve firing. Members of the team reported seeing a faint violet static charge glowing across their own skin, while the hair on their arms stood straight up under the massive electrostatic field saturating the valley. Recognizing that the field intensity was reaching levels capable of causing permanent neurological damage or triggering a catastrophic surface arc, Dr. Taylor ordered an immediate emergency shutdown of every active sensor and generator on the property. They severed the copper ground wires, pulled the master breakers on the telemetry trailers, and retreated to the perimeter beyond the east field fence. The moment the surface ground loop was broken, cutting off external conductivity to the subterranean matrix, the underground network reacted instantly. The 10-foot pillar of ice-blue plasma didn't detonate or scatter. It contracted with violent speed, snapping back down into the open drill shaft like a released spring. A localized implosive wave swept across the triangle, a silent, crushing pressure drop that instantly extinguished the bioluminescent soil glow, flattened the atmospheric vortex overhead, and returned the valley's magnetic field to total baseline stillness. The earth beneath Skinwalker Ranch went completely dark once more. The central vault inside the Mesa had sealed its technology back behind hundreds of feet of stone, returning to its dormant state, waiting for the next intrusion. The sudden, implosive collapse of the energy pillar left an absolute heavy quiet hanging over the desert floor. As the dust settled and the high-voltage static charge slowly drained out of the desert soil, the scientific team cautiously approached the exploratory site. Ground surface temperature sensors, which moments before had read freezing sub-zero metrics, were now showing near-zero thermal signatures. The ground soil had been flash-frozen and stripped of every ambient BTU of thermal energy within a 50-foot radius. Inside the command trailer, primary server banks slowly rebooted on isolated, battery-backed auxiliary lines. Diagnostic sweeps were immediately initialized across all surviving diagnostic arrays. Every instrument that had weathered the electromagnetic storm, from the microgravimeters to the spectrum analyzers, had logged the exact same final event, a total, synchronized shutoff of the subterranean power matrix the instant the surface ground loop was severed. The data gathered during those critical minutes permanently altered the direction of research at Skinwalker Ranch. What had long been dismissed as sporadic, uncoordinated paranormal events, erratic light orbs, sudden radiation bursts, localized spatial anomalies, and transient 1.6 GHz radio spikes was finally exposed as the surface symptoms of a single unified underground machine. The 6 radial conduits, the central hub buried hundreds of feet beneath the triangle, and the high-density vitrified shell lining the Mesa were all integrated components of a massive subterranean complex embedded deep within the bedrock of the Uinta Basin. It was an underground system capable of manipulating localized gravity, channeling gigawatts of environmental energy, and broadcasting directed telemetry streams straight into the upper atmosphere. To understand the sheer physical scale of what was resting beneath their boots without risking another high-energy discharge, Dr. Travis Taylor turned to a cutting-edge subatomic mapping technique, cosmic ray muon tomography. Muons are high-energy subatomic particles generated continuously when cosmic rays strike Earth's upper atmosphere. They rain down across the globe, penetrating hundreds of feet of dense rock and soil before being absorbed. By placing ultra-sensitive muon detector panels around the base of the Mesa and recording the direction and angle of every particle passing through the rock over several days, researchers can compile a high-resolution, three-dimensional density map of the mountain's interior. The team deployed 4 muon detection arrays along the cliff face, locking them into position and streaming raw particle counts into a dedicated supercomputing cluster. For 72 hours, the subatomic data trickled in, slowly building a volumetric cross-section of the surrounding sandstone strata. But when the particle counts reached statistical confidence and the computer rendered the final high-contrast volumetric map, the resulting image silenced everyone in the room. The muon scan exposed a multi-tiered, highly structured geometric complex buried deep inside the rock core. At the center of the Mesa sat a massive, egg-shaped vault spanning nearly 300 feet in height. Encircling this primary chamber was a complex matrix of concentric rings, interlocking structural ribs, and perfectly straight access shafts, a layout that resembled an industrial containment facility or a massive centrifuge array, rather than any natural geological cavern. Even more disturbing was the density data returned from the core of the central vault itself. Standard rock absorbs muons at a predictable rate based on its mineral composition. Empty caves allow muons to pass through with zero absorption. But the core of the Mesa's central vault showed an absorption signature so dense that it completely blocked the cosmic particles from reaching the detectors below. Suspended directly in the center of the vault was an ultra-high-density physical object, a mass so dense and compact that its atomic structure exceeded the density of solid lead or depleted uranium. The data was undeniable. The Mesa was housing a massive, ultra-dense metallic artifact, suspended inside a sub-zero, magnetically shielded vault, hidden behind hundreds of feet of solid sandstone. As Dr. Taylor analyzed the spatial orientation of the interior rings, he realized that the subterranean conduits extending toward the triangle were connected directly to the perimeter of this central mass. The object inside the Mesa was acting as the core power generator, feeding raw energy down the conduits to drive the gravitational and electromagnetic anomalies witnessed on the surface. As the supercomputing cluster completed its render of the ultra-dense core, the Muon tomography data began to reflect a sudden alarming physical shift inside the Mesa. The high-contrast image displayed on the monitor, which had remained completely static for 3 days, started to blur at the edges. The cosmic ray absorption signature of the 300-foot central vault was changing in real time. The ultra-dense mass suspended inside the subterranean chamber was beginning to rotate. Slowly at first, the mass spun along a perfectly balanced gyroscopic axis, its rotation speed accelerating in precise stepped increments. Around the central vault, the concentric rings etched into the density map began to align, locking into position like the mechanical tumblers of an impossibly massive vault lock. As the core spooled up, the surrounding sandstone cliff face began to experience extreme electrical polarization. Sensors placed along the Mesa's outer wall recorded a massive surge in piezoelectric output. The sheer mechanical stress exerted by the spinning core deep within the mountain was compressing the quartz crystals inside the sandstone, causing the rock wall itself to generate tens of thousands of volts of static electricity. Dr. Travis Taylor and Chief Engineer Erik Bard rushed outside the command trailer into the cool night air. What they witnessed under the glow of the perimeter floodlights defied every law of classical mechanics. The massive cliff wall was visibly vibrating. Loose shale, gravel, and heavy pebbles resting at the base of the Mesa were no longer tumbling downward under the pull of gravity. Instead, they began to lift off the dirt, levitating several inches into the air before being drawn horizontally along invisible field lines toward the cliff face. The air surrounding the mountain turned an eerie, luminous shade of electric blue. The atmosphere had become so heavily ionized that continuous microarcs of cold plasma were leaping off the sagebrush branches, sparking across the metal fence wire with a dry, crackling hiss that echoed through the canyon. Simultaneously, the 1.6 GHz signal burst back onto the spectrum analyzers, but its baseline structure had fundamentally changed. It was no longer an erratic, uncoordinated pulse. The broadcast had locked into a hyperstructured digital carrier wave, a high-density stream of binary telemetry shooting straight through the rock face. Oscilloscope displays showed tight, repeating data packets being transmitted at incredible speed. Tracking the trajectory of this focused signal revealed a chilling detail. The broadcast was not scattering uselessly into the sky. It was being tightly collimated into a narrow electromagnetic beam, shooting out from the apex of the Mesa at a precise angle toward a fixed coordinate in Earth's upper orbital plane. The Mesa was operating as an automated orbital relay, sending diagnostic metrics from its subterranean core directly to a point in space where no known military or civilian satellite was supposed to be positioned. Realizing the extreme danger posed by the escalating electrical discharge, Dr. Taylor ordered an immediate full-spectrum shutdown of all surface equipment. The team pulled the master breakers on the primary diesel generators, disconnected the backup battery arrays, and severed every copper ground rod connected to the telemetry trailers. They were trying to break the circuit, hoping that depriving the soil of conductive grounds would starve the subterranean matrix of the external, electrical loop it was tapping into. As the surface power went dead, plunging the valley into total darkness illuminated only by the pale blue glow of ionized air, the machine inside the Mesa responded to the sudden drop in electrical load. The mechanical whine echoing through the rock didn't slow down. It dropped into a deep subaudible infrasound wave below 5 Hz. The physical shock wave traveled out horizontally through the bedrock, causing the ground beneath the researchers' boots to drop several inches in a sudden, sickening heave. It was not a tectonic earthquake. It was a localized gravitational contraction, a brief, violent compression of space-time centered on the Mesa that pulled the entire 512-acre property toward its subterranean core for a fraction of a second before releasing it back to absolute stillness. The violent, localized gravitational compression left the researchers standing in total shock. Their feet braced against a floor that had briefly lost its anchor to standard physics. The subaudible infrasound wave rolled away through the deep sandstone layers of the Uinta Basin, leaving behind an absolute, unnatural silence. Although every surface generator was off and every display terminal dark, the air remained saturated with a dense electrostatic field that made the skin prickle and every breath taste metallic. In the faint starlight, Dr. Travis Taylor looked up toward the looming silhouette of the mesa. The pale blue plasma glow that had previously blanketed the cliff face had vanished, but in its place an even more extraordinary optical phenomenon began to unfold. The sheer sandstone wall was no longer entirely solid to the eye. Where the thermal imaging had previously flagged cold geometric shapes deep beneath the surface, the physical rock now appeared strangely translucent, a phenomenon caused by extreme electromagnetic fields aligning the crystalline matrix of the sandstone and altering its refractive index. The cliff face had become a window into the ancient bedrock. For nearly 30 seconds, the researchers stood bathed in starlight, staring directly into the heart of the mountain. Embedded 30 feet inside the stone face sat a continuous dark monolithic barrier extending as far into the interior as the human eye could trace, a smooth, engineered hull constructed from the same exotic composite matrix recovered from the crushed drill bits. It showed no signs of weathering, no structural fracture lines, and no trace of geological decay. It sat perfectly preserved, entombed within stone that had formed over millions of years. Then, as the residual static charge drained deep into the subterranean aquifers below, the sandstone face slowly faded back into solid, opaque rock, hiding the vault once more. When the command trailer's diagnostic systems were safely re-energized using isolated optical lines, the data recovery process yielded the definitive proof the team had spent years searching for. High-precision differential GPS units deployed across the valley floor revealed that during the exact moment of the gravitational compression, the spatial coordinates of the ranch had glitched simultaneously. The surface of Skinwalker Ranch hadn't merely moved physically. The sensors registered a temporary, spatial drift of nearly 2 meters, while the altitude metrics recorded a brief, sharp drop before returning to normal. Yet the perimeter fences, dirt access roads, and natural rock outcroppings had not cracked or shifted relative to the surrounding basin. The entire property had experienced a localized spatial displacement, a brief window where the physical space enclosed by the ranch was shifted slightly out of phase with the surrounding world. Dr. Travis Taylor had his answer. The bizarre phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch were not a collection of random, unexplained occurrences, nor were they the product of military illusions or psychological hysteria. They were the physical outputs of a massive subterranean machine, an ancient technological complex constructed from exotic composite materials, housed within a hollowed-out mesa, and engineered to manipulate gravity, electromagnetism, and space-time itself. As the diagnostic telemetry stabilized and the magnetic field baseline settled back into equilibrium, the team understood the immense responsibility resting on their shoulders. They were no longer simply observing strange occurrences in the sky. They were standing directly above an active, high-energy subterranean complex, a machine that had remained dormant for centuries, but was now fully aware of the scientific eyes probing its secrets. The terrifying realization that Skinwalker Ranch rests directly above an active subterranean complex changes everything we thought we knew about our planet's history. For generations, humanity looked up toward the stars with a quiet sense of superiority, assuming that if an advanced intelligence ever arrived to alter our understanding of physics, it would descend from the deep cosmos in shining metallic craft. We pointed our radio telescopes into the void, listened for faint signals across light years of space, and watched the night sky for answers. Yet, the definitive physical evidence uncovered by Dr. Travis Taylor and his team proves that the ultimate mystery was never waiting among the distant stars. It was buried directly beneath our feet all along. The implications of what lies entombed inside that sandstone mesa extend far beyond the borders of the Uinta Basin. The zero-conductivity ceramic matrix, the titanium-aluminum composite armor, the sub-zero cryogenic cooling loops, and the ultra-dense rotating core suspended deep within the mountain are not the signatures of human industrial engineering. They represent a technology so far beyond modern physics that it blurs the line between human science and total impossibility. Whether this subterranean network is a planetary monitoring node left behind by an ancient terrestrial civilization, or a forward defense installation deployed by an extra-dimensional intelligence, one truth is now beyond debate. It is operational, it is responding to external stimulus, and it is fully aware of our presence. The exploratory drill shafts, seismic shockwaves, and targeted radio sweeps didn't just log data. They closed an energy loop that had remained dormant for centuries. The mesa was never a passive geological formation. It was constructed as a hardened subterranean vault, engineered to protect a world-altering power generator until a species on the surface developed the technological capability to probe its shell. Now that humanity has physically knocked on its door, the machine inside the mountain has initialized its internal systems, aligned its internal gyroscopic core, and begun broadcasting high-density diagnostic telemetry straight into orbital space. As Dr. Travis Taylor, Erik Bard, and their scientific team recalibrate their diagnostic arrays for the next phase of deep penetration research, the message echoing out of the Utah desert is unmistakable. Our planet is far older, stranger, and more complex than mainstream science ever dared to admit. The secrets buried deep within the Mesa at Skinwalker Ranch are no longer just local legends or campfire stories told under the desert stars. They are the physical key to understanding a hidden reality that has been waiting in the dark beneath us for millennia. If this deep dive into the shocking discoveries inside Skinwalker Ranch's Mesa blew your mind, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode as this investigation continues to unfold. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think the Mesa hides an ancient Earth defense system or an alien technology left here long ago? Leave your theories in the comments below. Thank you for watching and stay curious.